You know that feeling, right? It's a very specific, very universal kind of dread.
Oh, absolutely. Everyone knows it.
Yeah. You're sitting there, maybe it's a Sunday night, and the glow of your phone is just illuminating your face in this otherwise completely dark room. And you are feeling entirely trapped by a job that honestly just drains the life out of you.
Right. And you're staring at your banking app icon, just absolutely terrified to actually tap it.
Exactly. You are bracing yourself for the number on that screen, feeling like your financial life is this, I don't know, this runaway train.
Yeah.
And you're just a passenger locked in the back car, completely out of control.
It's awful. You're craving this radical transformation of your personal net worth, but the gap between where you are and where you want to be just feels mathematically insurmountable.
It really does. And that Sunday night anxiety, I mean, it is practically the defining modern condition for so many people.
It is. We live caught in this brutal tension between the life we are actively enduring and the life we actually want to be living. And money is this giant, intimidating monolith standing right in the middle of those two realities.
Right. And the instinct is almost always to just look away, right? To distract ourselves.
Yeah, because facing that monolith requires dismantling the entire way we've been taught to think about our careers, our value, and our security. It's not easy.
Which brings us directly to the source material for our deep dive today. We are pulling from the Mano Invest channel, specifically this really fascinating masterclass by a former investment banker turned money expert, Nisha Shah.
Yes, and the goal here is to decode the complex mechanics of personal finance, break down the psychological architecture of those invisible scripts holding you back, and build a highly actionable 6-month roadmap to actual financial freedom.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the place she starts is what she calls the illusion of the corporate ladder. And I mean, this programming begins so early, doesn't it?
Oh, totally. From primary school, the societal algorithm is just hard-coded into us. You secure a university degree, you land a high-paying corporate job, and you begin the endless climb.
And there is an undeniable seduction to it. The glitz, the status, the sheer momentum of traditional success. It feels good.
It's seductive because it eliminates the cognitive burden of choice. When society hands you a pre-drawn map, you don't have to face the existential terror of, charting your own course in the wilderness.
You just put your head down and climb.
Yeah.
But the critical realization, the one that hit Nisha firsthand after 9 years submerged in this high-stakes ecosystem of investment banking, is the sheer devastation of it all.
Yeah, the realization that you can exhaust yourself for a decade, finally reach the summit, and then realize your ladder has been leaning against the entirely wrong wall the whole time.
Man, that is a heavy realization. She had a massive salary, she had the elite status, yet she experienced this profound, almost physical disconnect.
Right, and it forces a terrifying confrontation with reality. She poses this defining question in the masterclass that just stops you dead in your tracks.
Yeah, she asks, would you still be happy if you were living the exact same life in 5 or 10 years?
That is a psychological tripwire right there.
It really is.
Right.
Because if the honest answer is a visceral no, you are instantly thrust into a crisis of action.
Exactly. You reach a tipping point where the fear of remaining stagnant finally eclipses the fear of the unknown. But what we really need to examine here is the cognitive quicksand that traps people for decades before they ever reach that breaking point.
The sunk cost bias, right?
Yes. Behavioral economists call it the sunk cost bias. A sunk cost is simply resources like time, money, or energy that you have already spent and cannot ever get back.
Right. And rationally, those spent resources should have absolutely zero bearing on your future decisions.
Rationally, sure, but human beings do not operate on pure rationality. Far from it.
No, we really don't. Because when you are 5, 10, or 15 years into a specific career trajectory, holding this astronomically expensive degree that your family expected you to get, your identity becomes irrevocably entangled with your job title.
You start running this subconscious mental tally, right? Of the late nights, the stress, the tuition money.
Yeah, you think everyone in my social ecosystem understands who I am in this exact context. How can I possibly abandon this identity without rendering all that past suffering completely meaningless?
It's the terror of the holiday dinner table.
Oh, exactly. You don't want to have to explain to your extended family why the so-called successful person in the family is suddenly unemployed and searching for meaning.
Precisely. Because society understands the label of investment banker or senior corporate manager. It's easily categorizable.
Right.
Society does not readily understand or support the label, I am starting over at 35 to find internal alignment.
Yeah, people look at you like you're crazy.
Walking away from a high-status career strips away the armor of external validation. You are suddenly forced to source your worth internally.
Which is a muscle most high achievers have completely atrophied, right?
Absolutely. If you refuse to write your own narrative, you default to the narrative society writes for you. And that is usually one of quiet, well-compensated desperation.
I want to look at it through an analogy. Climbing that corporate ladder is like hiking a grueling, nearly vertical mountain for years. You are sweating, your muscles are screaming, but you push through because everyone tells you the summit is breathtaking.
Right, so you can keep going.
Yeah, you finally drag yourself to the peak, you look around and you realize the view is terrible.
Right.
It is barren, foggy, and miserable.
But instead of climbing down to find a better mountain?
Exactly. You refuse to descend because your legs are already tired. You pitch a tent in the misery purely to validate the physical effort it took to get there in the first place.
That mountain analogy is great for the ascent, but it misses a crucial element of the psychology at the summit, the altitude sickness.
Oh, interesting. How so?
Well, the higher you get on that wrong mountain, the more specialized you become, and the more dependent you become on the specific oxygen of that environment. The high salary, the stock options, the deferred compensation.
So you aren't just tired, you are physically addicted to the environment you hate.
Exactly. You choose permanent dissatisfaction over temporary discomfort because the discomfort of withdrawal is just too acute.
Which brings up a massive reality check, honestly. Because it is incredibly inspiring to tell you just climb down the mountain, walk away from the expectations, and write your own story.
It sounds great on paper.
But realistically, quitting a high-status job means severing your lifeline to capital. Rent is due on the first of the month, regardless of your journey towards self-actualization.
It's true.
So how does the listener avoid catastrophic financial ruin in the pursuit of fulfillment?
That pushback is absolutely essential. We have to separate the romanticized idea of impulsivity from the reality of calculated risk.
Right, because what the culture often mislabels as taking a brave leap of faith is almost always underwritten by a quietly constructed, mathematically sound financial cushion.
You cannot jump without a parachute and call it flying. This requires transitioning from the psychology of identity loss to the brutal mathematics of the ultimate safety net.
So let's dismantle the danger of the all-or-nothing mentality. The masterclass aggressively attacks this cinematic narrative that you have to storm into your boss's office, dramatically quit in a blaze of glory, and launch your dream business the next morning.
That narrative is the fastest way to assassinate your own dream.
Totally.
When you take a massive leap without a structural safety net, your passion suddenly inherits a full-time job. Your dream is instantly burdened with paying your electricity bill, your rent, your groceries, your insurance.
And the second your dream is responsible for your survival, it stops feeling like a dream. It becomes a mandatory chore.
You are thrust out of a creative state and directly into a fight-or-flight survival state.
Yeah, you stop innovating and start monetizing every single desperate idea just to keep the lights on.
Because creativity requires psychological safety. The masterclass suggests a fundamental paradigm shift regarding how we view our current employment.
Stop seeing your soul-crushing 9-to-5 as a prison.
Yes. Reframe it as a highly effective utility. Your day job is an angel investor. It serves one specific purpose. It funds your baseline financial life and buys you the stability required to experiment.
I love that. It subsidizes your evenings and weekends so you can build your passion project without the suffocating pressure of imminent starvation.
Exactly. And to actually build the math for this transition, the source material provides a rigorous formula for the safety net, accumulating 3 to 6 months of basic living expenses.
And to be clear, not your lifestyle-inflated expenses, but your bare-bones, survival-level burn rate.
You have to audit your life mercilessly. Calculate the exact physiological and structural cost of surviving for one single month. Rent, basic nutrition, utilities, and mandatory minimum debt payments.
That is your baseline burn rate.
Right. You multiply that by 3 for a minimal operational runway, or by 6 if you require deeper psychological security to innovate.
And if you are highly risk-averse, the masterclass notes you could even push this to a 9-month runway. You are essentially buying the most valuable, non-renewable commodity on Earth: time.
You are purchasing the time to think, the time to pivot, and the time to fail without consequence.
But, and this is the barrier most people never cross, to build a 3 to 6 month safety net, you have to actually know your numbers. You have to open the banking app.
Which loops us right back to that Sunday night dread we talked about. The masterclass identifies avoiding this as the single most destructive money mistake people make.
The ostrich effect.
Yes. It is widely known in behavioral finance as the ostrich effect. What's fascinating here is the underlying mechanism.
Right. We actively bury our heads in the sand. We survive a weekend of impulsive, heavy spending, and then we actively avoid logging into our accounts for a week.
Operating under this deeply irrational hope that if we refuse to observe the negative balance, it won't actually exist.
It's so funny, but we all do it. But why?
Because it has very little to do with mathematical illiteracy. We do not hide from the numbers because addition and subtraction are difficult.
Right.
We hide because bank statements are fundamentally moral documents. They act as an unforgiving mirror, reflecting our true, unfiltered priorities back at us.
Looking at your transaction history forces you to confront the painful cognitive dissonance between your stated core values and your actual behavioral patterns.
Exactly. You might loudly proclaim that you value financial independence and want to buy a home, but your ledger shows a relentless pattern of late-night impulse purchases.
Effectively proving that you value fleeting dopamine hits more than your future self. It strips away all the lies we tell ourselves.
It's brutal but necessary.
But to be fair to the listener, the modern global economy is weaponized to make this self-sabotage easier than at any point in human history.
Oh, without a doubt. The masterclass focuses heavily on the modern danger of frictionless spending.
Let's talk about the evolution of that, because spending money used to demand physical, logistical effort.
It did. You had to travel to a bank during specific hours, interact with a teller, withdraw heavy physical currency, and carry it around.
And at the point of sale, you had to manually count the paper bills, hand them over, and physically feel the weight of your wallet decrease.
That physical friction forced a mandatory neurological pause. Your prefrontal cortex, the logical, forward planning center of your brain, had the necessary milliseconds to engage and ask, is this exchange of value actually worth it?
Compare that to today. The physical currency vanished into plastic, and now the plastic has vanished into the digital ether.
We are literally double-clicking a side button on a smartphone while lying in bed at 2 a.m., authorizing a purchase from a hyper-targeted algorithm without ever changing our physical posture.
It's wild. Modern fintech applications and e-commerce platforms are architected identically to a Las Vegas casino floor.
Exactly. There are no clocks, there are no windows, and there is absolutely zero friction. The entire user interface is engineered by behavioral psychologists with one singular objective:
to bypass your prefrontal cortex entirely and tap directly into the amygdala, the impulse center of the brain.
Yes. When a platform offers buy now with one click or biometric authentication like Face ID, they are eliminating the final microsecond of cognitive pause required to even type in a PIN code.
Relying on raw human willpower to defeat a multi-billion-dollar algorithm designed to hack your dopamine receptors is just a losing battle.
It really is.
But I hear the casino analogy, and I have to play devil's advocate here for a second. Isn't convenience the ultimate goal of technological innovation?
Well, sure.
I mean, we actively desire a frictionless existence. We like bypassing the subway turnstile with a flick of the wrist. We like the coffee arriving the second we walk into the cafe.
We do.
So if biometric authentication and instant gratification are the default states of the modern infrastructure, how can you practically ask the listener to artificially inject friction back into a world that is designed to be smooth?
It's a great question. You cannot change the macroeconomic infrastructure, which means you have to build artificial friction into your personal microsystems.
Okay, how does that look?
If the economy removes friction at the point of sale, you must forcefully reintroduce it at the point of access. This requires deliberate structural sabotage of your own convenience.
Structural sabotage. Give me an example.
It means manually deleting every saved credit card from your web browsers, so you are forced to physically stand up, find your wallet, and type out 16 digits for every single online purchase.
Oh, that is so annoying, but I see why it works.
Right. It means housing your emergency safety net in an entirely separate, obscure banking institution that does not offer a mobile app and requires a mandatory 72-hour clearing period to transfer funds.
You have to build deliberate speed bumps on your own financial superhighway, so your logical brain has time to catch up with your impulses.
Exactly. Which means the ultimate speed bump is actually looking at the numbers. To survive a frictionless ecosystem, the ostrich effect has to die.
But since we just established that observing the numbers triggers an intense shame spiral, how do we approach budgeting without it feeling like a punitive, miserable diet? The word budget itself carries so much negative baggage.
The masterclass directly addresses that baggage by proposing a radically sustainable alternative. the 20-minute monthly financial review.
Just 20 minutes.
Yes. The goal is not to endure hours of agonizing data entry on a complex spreadsheet. It is about high-impact, low-duration engagement.
But the key insight here is that you cannot force a one-size-fits-all system. The source breaks down two distinct budgeting personalities. If you use the wrong system for your brain type, you will inevitably fail.
Let's look at the first personality, the avoider.
Oh, I know so many avoiders. The avoider is paralyzed by financial minutia. If you present an avoider with an itemized spreadsheet, their nervous system just shuts down.
We all know the avoider routine. They try to aestheticize the process.
Yeah, they light an expensive candle, pour a glass of wine, open a blank Excel document.
Stare at the blinking cursor for exactly 4 minutes. Experience a wave of existential dread. Close the laptop and finish the wine while binge-watching a television show to numb the anxiety.
A highly accurate clinical description. So what does the masterclass prescribe for them?
For the avoider, it prescribes the back of a napkin approach. You must zoom out and recognize that the ultimate objective of a budget is singular. Ensure a specific portion of capital is saved. That is the only metric that matters.
Therefore, the avoider must rely entirely on automated architecture. You determine a flat, non-negotiable amount to save from every paycheck.
The automated payday transfer, it is the holy grail for the avoider.
So, on the precise day your paycheck clears, before you are even awake, a predetermined sum is automatically routed to that separate, hard-to-access savings account we discussed earlier.
You are fundamentally prioritizing yourself before you pay the electric company, the landlord, or the grocery store.
And once that automated transfer executes, the avoider is free to spend whatever remains in their primary checking account with absolute guilt-free abandon.
The automated system absorbs the heavy lifting, eliminating the need for daily willpower or tracking. It completely neutralizes the shame.
That's brilliant. But then you have the other end of the spectrum, the optimizer.
Right. The optimizer derives psychological comfort from granular control. They actively want to look under the hood and track the flow of capital.
But the danger for the optimizer is burnout through hyper-restriction.
Exactly. If you build a budget that relies on 100% efficiency and zero joy, it will inevitably shatter. The masterclass recommends the optimizer use a proportional split. 65% for fundamentals, 25% for fun, and 10% for the future.
Okay, so the 65% fundamentals bucket represents your non-negotiable survival baseline. The housing costs, the utility grid, the transportation, the basic caloric intake required to live.
Correct. But the critical component is the 25% fun bucket. A budget that outlaws joy is a budget that guarantees a catastrophic relapse.
This 25% is mandatory allocation for dining out, concerts, hobbies, and travel. It is mathematically planned spontaneity.
And finally, the 10% future bucket is aggressively deployed toward investments, the emergency safety net, or accelerating debt destruction.
And to assist both the avoider and the optimizer in moments of weakness, the masterclass introduces 3 incredibly potent pause questions to deploy immediately before executing a transaction.
These are so helpful. Question 1, do I actually need this?
Question 2, if I do need it, can I survive with less of it?
And question 3, can I acquire the exact same utility for a cheaper price?
Those questions serve as a cognitive interrupt. They forcibly inject that missing friction into the transaction.
And this ties directly into a core philosophy from Warren Buffett that the source material highlights. Buffett states, do not save what is left after spending, but spend what is left after saving.
That makes perfect sense. If your financial strategy is to casually swipe your debit card for 30 days and pray there is a surplus remaining on the final day of the month, your probability of building long-term wealth is mathematically 0.
That requires radical intentionality. But this leads to a massive paradigm shift in the deep dive, one that aggressively counters the generic financial advice dominating the internet.
The prevailing cultural narrative insists that the road to wealth is paved with extreme, relentless frugality. Cancel the streaming services, stop buying coffee, reuse tea bags, clip every coupon.
If you are operating at an absolute deficit, living paycheck to paycheck, then yes, tactical frugality is a necessary tourniquet to stop the bleeding.
Right.
But the masterclass introduces a brutal mathematical reality that most financial gurus ignore. Frugality has a hard, impenetrable ceiling.
You literally cannot cut your living expenses below 0. There is a rigid mathematical limit to how much capital you can retain by negotiating your internet bill or denying yourself a latte.
But your earning potential, the top end of your income generation, has no theoretical limit.
This forces us to reevaluate the cliché, time is money. We often utilize that phrase without understanding the underlying mechanics.
The source material provides a highly illuminating scenario for this. Picture an individual who spends 2 exhausting hours navigating a customer service phone tree, escalating to 3 different managers, engaging in a psychological war of attrition, purely to secure a $10 monthly discount on a cable bill.
And when they finally get that $10 credit, they feel a massive rush of victory. They feel like they gamed the system.
They feel victorious, but the mathematics tell a deeply tragic story. If you expend 2 hours of high-stress cognitive energy to retain $10, you have effectively valued your own life force at $5 an hour.
Wow. When you put it like that, it's depressing.
Now, extrapolate that. Imagine if that exact same individual took those 2 hours of intense focus, determination, and negotiation skills and redirected them toward acquiring a high-leverage skill.
Or optimizing a process for their employer, or launching a specialized consulting side hustle.
The return on that energy investment would dwarf the $10 saved.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The focus on frugality versus income generation requires an analogy. Obsessing over extreme frugality cutting coupons to build wealth is mathematically equivalent to attempting to empty a flooded basement with a teaspoon.
Right. Yes, you are technically removing water.
You are technically making incremental progress. But focusing your energy on drastically increasing your income, that is like installing an industrial-grade sump pump. It fundamentally alters the fluid dynamics of your financial ecosystem.
The structural integrity of the basement still matters, of course. You cannot out-earn catastrophic spending habits, but the pump dictates the speed of recovery.
Wealth accumulation is simply the gap between the capital you generate and the capital you consume.
You can attempt to widen that gap by agonizing over microscopic expenses, or you can blast the gap wide open by pouring rocket fuel onto the income side of the equation.
If you double your income while actively resisting lifestyle creep, the surplus capital you bank expands exponentially.
That solves the income theory, but how do we actually execute the mechanics of generating more capital?
Well, the masterclass strips money down to its atomic definition. Money is not real. It is merely a physical or digital representation of an exchange of value.
Therefore, the only mechanical way to attract more money is to increase the measurable value you deliver to the marketplace.
Exactly. If you operate within the confines of a traditional W-2 corporate structure, you must conduct a ruthless audit of your utility. You have to ask highly specific questions.
How do I transition from being a replaceable cog to an indispensable asset? Can I volunteer for the complex, high-friction projects that my peers actively avoid?
Can I identify an inefficiency in our supply chain and present a solution that directly increases top-line revenue? Can I anticipate my manager's operational bottlenecks and neutralize them before they occur?
The marketplace does not compensate you for the hours you exist in a chair. It compensates you strictly for the scarcity and impact of the problems you solve.
But wait, what about the listener trapped in an industry with rigid, unyielding income caps? If you are a public school teacher, a nurse, or a civil servant, your pay bands are dictated by bureaucratic formulas, regardless of the value you add.
The masterclass insists that in those scenarios, you must deploy your value outside the primary structure.
You observe your immediate ecosystem, your colleagues, your community, your digital network, and ask, what specific friction exists in these people's lives? And what unique skill do I possess that can eliminate that friction?
What will they willingly pay to have solved? To facilitate this, the masterclass recommends a vital cognitive exercise. Establish a definitive internal hourly rate for your time.
Decide fundamentally what 1 hour of your existence is worth to the market.
If a mundane chore like painting your own living room or fixing a leaky faucet saves you money but equates to an hourly payout significantly lower than your internal rate, you must outsource it.
You buy back those hours and violently protect that time, using it exclusively to compound your earning power. It is the ultimate transition from a mindset of scarcity to a mindset of abundance.
But there is a massive psychological roadblock here. Many people subconsciously sabotage their earning potential because of deep-seated generational programming.
Right. They harbor a quiet belief that desiring more capital makes them inherently greedy or morally corrupt.
The cultural programming that money is the root of all evil is a deeply embedded virus. But the masterclass reframes this entirely. Money possesses zero moral alignment. It is an inanimate amplifier.
Accumulating capital simply exaggerates your core character trait.
If you are inherently selfish and cruel, wealth will allow you to scale your cruelty. But if you are generous, empathetic, and community-driven, acquiring massive wealth provides the exact leverage required to deploy that generosity on a world-changing scale.
We frequently artificially cap our earning potential simply to mirror the environment we were raised in. If everyone in your childhood zip code earned $50,000 a year, your brain subconsciously accepts that as the absolute ceiling of human capability.
You have to violently shatter that artificial ceiling and recognize there are individuals generating that exact amount in a single week. Not because they possess superior DNA, but because they mastered the mechanics of scaling their value.
That conceptual understanding of value and earning is powerful, but holding that knowledge in a checking account is mathematically identical to setting it on fire due to inflation.
Knowledge without execution is just intellectual entertainment.
The critical difference between the financially elite and the stagnant majority isn't the grandeur of their goals. It is the specific, aggressive micro-habits they utilize to force execution.
Which forces us to examine the mechanics of execution. How do we cross the chasm between theoretical knowledge and kinetic action? The masterclass devotes significant time to eradicating a specific pathology, analysis paralysis.
Analysis paralysis is the ultimate deception. It is when the act of hoarding information masquerades as doing the actual work.
You experience a massive dopamine hit of perceived productivity because you just spent 6 hours reading subreddits about Roth IRAs, yet you have not physically transferred a single dollar into the market.
The brain successfully tricks you into feeling a sense of accomplishment purely through consumption.
The masterclass identifies the defining micro-habit of the wealthy, the immediate, ruthless translation of knowledge into kinetic action.
The moment you comprehend a new financial mechanism, you are required to execute a microaction that exact same day. The execution does not require perfection, it merely requires motion.
The source material illustrates this brilliantly with the story about Nisha Shah. She was conducting a seminar and met a woman in the lobby afterward.
This woman had done an exhausting amount of research. She knew the exact ticker symbols of the index funds she wanted, she had the brokerage app downloaded on her device, and her bank account was fully linked and funded.
But she was totally frozen by the sheer terror of pulling the trigger. She had been trapped in the stasis for months.
And Nisha's intervention was to collapse the timeline. She refused to let the woman leave the lobby. She challenged her to execute the trade right there, under observation.
Within 3 minutes, the woman pushed the button and finalized her first investment.
The moment the pixels on the screen confirmed the trade, months of compounding anxiety evaporated. The catastrophic failure she had imagined in her head simply did not exist in reality.
It is about forcefully collapsing the gap between learning and doing. The masterclass also dissects the linguistic difference between a vague wish and a kinetic plan.
Declaring, "I want to save more money this year," is functionally useless. It is a wish broadcast into the void.
It lacks any actionable architecture. The financially successful replace vague wishes with ruthless mathematical clarity.
A kinetic plan has exact parameters. It sounds like this. I will accumulate exactly $5,000 in liquid savings over the next 12 months. Mathematically, this requires a surplus of $416.66 per month.
To generate the surplus, I will terminate 3 specific subscriptions totaling $45, negotiate my auto insurance downward by $30 next Tuesday at 2 p.m., and configure an automated transfer of the remaining $341 to execute on the 1st of every month.
The people who escape the financial matrix do not possess superior dreams. They possess superior operational blueprints.
And when we talk about execution, we have to transition from saving to leverage. We have to talk about the mechanics of investing because no matter how much you earn, trading hours for dollars will eventually exhaust you.
You must deploy your capital as an autonomous workforce.
But before we discuss the mechanics of the market, we have to neutralize a toxic misconception propagated by social media.
The internet is infested with algorithmic gurus selling the illusion of 100% effortless passive income.
The masterclass is brutally clear on the physics of this. True passive income does not exist without a staggering amount of kinetic upfront labor.
Engineering a software product, writing a manuscript, building a real estate portfolio, these demand years of highly concentrated, uncompensated effort before they yield autonomous dividends.
Any voice-promising, instant, frictionless, passive income is trying to separate you from your capital.
The only mechanism that comes close to true, accessible, passive wealth accumulation requiring zero physical labor from the investor is the global stock market.
Which is an ecosystem that induces sheer terror in the uninitiated.
Absolutely. because the cultural depiction of investing is entirely shaped by movies like The Wolf of Wall Street.
The average person believes investing requires a savant-level intellect, 6 computer monitors flashing red and green, and the hyper-stressful daily task of predicting which obscure tech startup is going to become the next global monopoly.
But the masterclass aggressively dismantles this myth. Attempting to pick individual stocks is a statistical death trap for the retail investor.
To understand why stock picking is a fool's errand, we have to examine the systemic blindness of experts. The masterclass points to the definitive historical case study, the 2008 global financial crisis and the catastrophic collapse of Lehman Brothers.
Lehman was not a fringe player. It was a 158-year-old titan of global finance. Literally days before Lehman imploded, triggering a worldwide economic deep freeze, analysts at some of the most prestigious investment banks on earth maintained a buy rating on Lehman's stock.
Let's truly contextualize that. These analysts possess Ivy League PhDs in mathematics. They have access to $25,000 a year Bloomberg terminals providing real-time global data.
They have armies of junior analysts modeling risk algorithms 80 hours a week, and despite possessing every conceivable informational advantage, they entirely missed the systemic rot of the subprime mortgage crisis.
They were so focused on the granular data of collateralized debt obligations that they failed to see the entire housing market was a house of cards.
If the most well-resourced experts on the planet got it that catastrophically wrong, the idea that a casual investor day trading on a mobile app during their lunch gurk can reliably beat the market is pure statistical hubris.
The mechanics of the market guarantee that the retail stock picker will eventually lose. So what is the mathematical solution? The masterclass emphatically points to the architectural brilliance of the index fund.
So what does this all mean for the listener's actual portfolio? To visualize the mechanics of an index fund, let's refine the casino analogy.
Okay, let's hear it.
When you buy a single individual stock, you are walking into the casino and placing your entire life savings on a single number on the roulette wheel. The odds of ruin are astronomical.
Right.
But when you purchase an index fund, you are not betting on a number. You are buying a microscopic ownership stake in the casino itself.
Regardless of who wins or loses at the individual tables, the house aggregates the overall flow of capital and consistently turns a profit over a long enough timeline.
And we need to explain exactly how that house functions, because an index fund like the S&P 500 is not a static list of companies. It is a dynamic, self-cleansing organism.
The S&P 500 tracks the 500 largest publicly traded companies in the United States, weighted by their market capitalization. When you buy one share of that fund, your capital is instantly fractionally distributed across Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, and 497 other corporate giants.
And the self-cleansing mechanism is the true superpower.
Precisely. If one of those 500 companies begins to fail, let's say their leadership makes terrible decisions and their stock price plummets, their market capitalization shrinks.
As they shrink, the index fund mathematically reduces your exposure to that failing company automatically.
If the company continues to spiral and falls out of the top 500 entirely, the index forcefully ejects it. It kicks the loser out and instantly replaces it with a new, thriving, rapidly growing company that just broke into the top 500.
The fund is perpetually pruning the dead branches and grafting on fresh growth, and it executes all of this complex rebalancing without you ever having to read a single quarterly earnings report or pay a massive management fee.
It is the ultimate expression of leveraging the entire engine of global capitalism.
The masterclass notes that even Warren Buffett, arguably the single greatest individual stock picker in human history, has legally mandated that upon his death, 90% of his wife's inheritance be deployed not into hand-picked stocks, but into low-cost, broadly diversified index funds.
When the architect of modern stock picking tells you to just buy the index, you buy the index.
But there is a critical caveat to this strategy. The source material outlines the absolute golden rule of investing. You must never expose capital to the stock market if you require that capital within the next 5 years.
This requires a deep understanding of the mechanics of volatility versus the mechanics of long-term compounding.
Historically, if you zoom out over several decades, the stock market yields an average annualized return of roughly 8% to 10%. But that word average is doing a lot of heavy lifting.
The stock market does not deliver a smooth, guaranteed 8% every year like clockwork. In any given 12-month period, the market is a chaotic, volatile pendulum.
It might surge upward by 25% during a tech boom, or it might violently contract by 30% during a global pandemic or a supply chain crisis.
Which dictates your timeline strategy. If you are accumulating capital for a specific short-term objective, a down payment on a house, a wedding, or a vehicle purchase in 2 years, and you deploy that capital into an index fund, you are not investing, you are gambling with your timeline.
If a macroeconomic shock causes the market to crash by 20% the exact month you need to write the check to the mortgage broker, you are forced to liquidate your assets at the absolute bottom of the market, locking in a catastrophic permanent loss simply because you hit a chronological deadline.
Short-term capital requires absolute stability. It belongs in a high-yield savings account or a certificate of deposit where the principal is protected by insurance.
But for capital you do not need for 10, 20, or 30 years. That capital must be exposed to the market to harness the mathematical miracle of compound interest.
Think about the mechanics of compounding. In year 1, your money earns a small return. In year 2, you earn a return on your original money, plus a return on the return from year 1.
Fast forward 30 years, and the vast majority of your portfolio is not the capital you contributed. It is the compounding ghosts of the interest generated decades ago.
And as the masterclass emphasizes, the modern financial infrastructure has eliminated every barrier to entry. You don't need a minimum balance of $10,000 or a broker in a tailored suit. You can literally begin purchasing fractional shares of the global economy on your mobile device with $5.
Okay, we have excavated a massive amount of theory. We have decoded the psychology of the sunk cost, mapped the architecture of frictionless spending, built the 20-minute operational budget, established the infinite ceiling of earning power, and dissected the exact self-cleansing mechanics of the index fund.
We covered a lot of ground.
But theory without a sequence is just noise. For the listener who is vibrating with stress right now, the listener actively drowning in credit card debt while the cost of basic groceries continues to inflate, we need to sequence this into a rigid, step-by-step masterclass plan to take them from chaos to total control.
The source material provides a highly specific, sequential 6-month blueprint. Step 1 is immediate and unambiguous. Accumulate a $2,000 emergency liquid cushion.
Do not attempt to invest. Do not even attempt to aggressively overpay your credit cards yet. Halt everything and forcibly route capital until you hit exactly $2,000 in a savings account.
And that number is not arbitrary. The masterclass cites specific Vanguard behavioral research demonstrating that simply possessing a $2,000 cash buffer increases an individual's overall metric of well-being by up to 21%.
It is a profound neurological shift. You transition out of the chronic cortisol-soaked scarcity mindset because you suddenly have a concrete barrier between your life and a blown transmission or a medical copay.
It buys you the psychological bandwidth required to execute the rest of the plan. You will eventually expand this to the full 3 to 6 months of living expenses, but the $2,000 is the critical first strike.
Once that shield is forged, you immediately pivot to step 2, the aggressive, merciless destruction of high-interest debt.
And the blueprint draws a definitive mathematical line in the sand. High-interest debt is strictly classified as any liability charging an interest rate exceeding 8%.
Practically speaking, this targets revolving credit card balances and predatory consumer loans. You must annihilate this debt before you even consider deploying capital into the stock market.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we need to explain the exact mathematics of why the 8% threshold is the absolute law. It loops back to the historical performance of the stock market, which, as we established, averages an 8% to 10% annualized return over decades.
Let's run a hypothetical scenario. Imagine you are carrying a $10,000 balance on a credit card that is charging you a 22% annual percentage rate.
Simultaneously, you decide to be smart and invest $10,000 into an S&P 500 index fund, which miraculously delivers a perfect 10% return that year.
Let's do the math on the spread. Your investments generated $1,000 in wealth, but your credit card generated $2,200 in interest penalties.
You feel like an investor, but mathematically, you just bled $1,200. You are actively subsidizing the credit card company's profits with your own net worth.
Attempting to invest while holding 22% debt is like trying to bail water into a boat that has a massive hole in the hull. You have to plug the hole.
You deploy every available microcent of your surplus capital to crush the debt over 8%. But once that is achieved, the blueprint moves to step 3, which is evaluating low-interest debt versus investing.
And this is where the rigidly optimized spreadsheet collides with the messy reality of human psychology. Suppose you hold a student loan at 4.5% or a mortgage locked in at 3%.
The strict mathematical algorithm dictates that you should only pay the absolute minimum on those 3% liabilities and aggressively route all your surplus capital into the index fund, capturing the spread between the 3% debt and the assumed 8% market return.
The spreadsheet says you win by investing. But the masterclass makes a profound contrarian point. We are not algorithms. We are biological organisms deeply susceptible to stress, anxiety, and relationship friction. Personal finance is inherently personal.
The tension between mathematical optimization and psychological freedom is the core of this step. If a $40,000 student loan balance is inducing chronic insomnia, if it is generating toxic friction in your marriage, or if it makes you feel trapped in a job you despise, then eradicating that debt has a massive, unquantifiable value.
The peace of mind dividend. The masterclass argues that paying off a 4% loan might be mathematically suboptimal, but if it allows your nervous system to fully downregulate, it is the correct financial decision.
You sleep better, your cognitive performance at work increases, and you are far less reactive. You should architect your balance sheet in a way that maximizes your ability to sleep soundly.
Only after you feel structurally and emotionally bulletproof regarding your debt should you aggressively pivot toward long-term investing.
Which transitions us perfectly into the final and undoubtedly most emotionally volatile section of the masterclass. The blueprint demands a total reevaluation of the ultimate generational dogma, the debate between buying a home versus renting.
This debate causes profound generational friction. If you speak to anyone from our parents' generation, securing a mortgage and getting onto the property ladder is viewed as the undisputed, universally applicable holy grail of adult success.
The inherited wisdom is always a variation of renting is just throwing money into a furnace, or renting is paying your landlord's mortgage while you get nothing in return.
But isn't a house the ultimate forced savings account? If you rent, you are completely at the mercy of a landlord. How does the listener reconcile the psychological comfort of owning against these hidden, unrecoverable costs?
Well, in the macroeconomic climate of the 1980s and 1990s, when housing prices were intrinsically tethered to median local wages, that advice was structurally sound. But the masterclass brutally outlines how the modern global economy has entirely severed that tether.
We are operating in a radically altered paradigm, where housing costs have inflated at a velocity that completely dwarfs wage growth.
Because of this massive distortion, the source vehemently warns against viewing a primary residence exclusively as a high-yield investment vehicle.
It is a consumption good, a place to shelter your family first, and an investment second. Now, buying a home undeniably provides immense psychological utility.
Knowing you possess the deed to the roof over your head, knowing you cannot be evicted at the whim of a landlord, and having the autonomy to drill holes in the walls, that psychological security is deeply valuable, much like paying off the low-interest debt we just discussed.
But the masterclass argues that renting also provides a massive, tangible psychological utility. It's just a different flavor of security.
Renting provides the ultimate currency of the modern era: geographic and financial agility.
It grants you the frictionless ability to accept a lucrative career opportunity 3,000 miles away without enduring the agonizing, multi-month logistical nightmare of selling a property.
You are not geographically tethered to a declining local economy. Furthermore, renting caps your financial downside. If the boiler explodes in February or the roof structure fails, you make a single phone call to the property manager.
You are completely insulated from a surprise $15,000 capital expenditure that would wipe out the average homeowner's entire emergency fund.
And this brings us to the hidden mathematics of the unrecoverable cost curve. When people engage in the rent versus buy debate, they almost universally commit a massive analytical error. They simply compare the monthly rent payment to the monthly mortgage payment.
But buying a property unleashes a cascade of massive, invisible costs that evaporate instantly and build exactly zero equity.
We have to map these unrecoverable costs. When you purchase, you are bleeding capital through property taxes, origination fees, appraisal costs, mandatory homeowners insurance, and massive ongoing maintenance budgets. The general rule being you must allocate 1% of the home's total value annually just to prevent the structure from decaying.
And critically, people fail to understand the mechanics of an amortization schedule. For the first 5 to 7 years of a standard 30-year mortgage, the vast majority of your monthly payment isn't building equity at all. It is going straight to the bank as interest profit.
Let's really hammer this home by looking at the opportunity cost of the down payment. Let's say you have $100,000 in liquid capital. If you trap that $100,000 inside the illiquid equity of a house, it is earning nothing on its own.
Yes, the house might appreciate, but historically, residential real estate often appreciates at barely above the rate of inflation, roughly 3% to 4%.
If instead you rented and deployed that $100,000 into the self-cleansing index funds we talked about, compounding at 8% to 10% over 30 years, The mathematical trajectory of your liquid net worth completely separates from the homeowner.
The masterclass uses this mathematical reality to completely redefine the concept of financial freedom. True freedom is the profound realization that neither buying nor renting possesses an inherent moral superiority.
It is strictly a mechanical decision about how you wish to deploy your capital to support your specific lifestyle design. If your ultimate goal is to establish deep, multi-decade roots in a single community and optimize for extreme stability, then absorbing the unrecoverable costs of buying is a sound strategy.
But if you optimize for extreme flexibility, mobility, and the hyper-compounding of liquid assets in the stock market, then renting is a mathematically ferocious path to wealth.
The objective is to make a kinetic, calculated choice, rather than sleepwalking into a 30-year liability simply because society handed you a script.
And that concept of actively choosing your path brings us perfectly full circle. We began this deep dive sitting in the dark, paralyzed by the dread of the banking app, trapped on a corporate mountain we never actually wanted to climb.
We excavated the psychology of the sunk cost bias that keeps us frozen. We engineered the mathematics of the 3 to 6 month safety net to buy back our most precious resource, which is time.
We analyzed the casino-like architecture of frictionless spending and formulated systems to artificially reintroduce friction into our financial lives.
We dismantled the shame of budgeting by embracing the automated reality of the avoider and the proportional structure of the optimizer.
We proved that frugality has a mathematical floor, while the ability to scale your value in the marketplace has an infinite ceiling.
We attacked analysis paralysis by forcing immediate kinetic execution. We demystified the catastrophic failure of the experts during the Lehman Brothers collapse to prove why retail stock picking is a trap. And we illuminated the brilliant self-cleansing mechanics of the index fund.
And finally, we sequenced the ultimate blueprint. Hit the $2,000 liquid threshold, obliterate the 8% debt spread, optimize your remaining liabilities for maximum peace of mind, and choose your housing structure based on mathematical reality rather than generational dogma.
And the overarching philosophy binding all these mechanics together is crucial. Acquiring capital does not change your foundational character, it merely amplifies it.
By mastering these specific micro-habits, you transition money from a terrifying monolith that dictates your limitations into an obedient utility.
You engineer a financial infrastructure that buys back your time, funds your actual values, and allows you to architect a life entirely of your own design.
But before we completely sign off, we always want to leave you with one final, deeply provocative concept to wrestle with long after this audio stops.
Based on the profound tension we uncovered between mathematical optimization and human psychology, consider this. If we mathematically acknowledge that paying off a low-interest debt yields a massive, highly valuable peace of mind dividend that cannot be captured on a spreadsheet,
how much invisible wealth do we stand to generate by completely aligning our daily frictionless spending with our deepest, most authentic core values?
Could achieving that absolute daily alignment where every single dollar deployed is a direct reflection of what you actually care about be the truest, most enduring form of financial freedom decades before you ever reach a mathematical retirement number?
That is an incredibly powerful paradigm shift to sit with. I hope you let that question echo in your mind the next time you find yourself avoiding that banking app. Turn the brightness up, face the numbers, and start building your safety net. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep asking the hard questions, interrogate the systems around you, and challenge yourself to execute at least one kinetic micro-action today. We'll see you next time.